Hey yo, what's good though? Soul here, and welcome back to my story mode. So, considering that we are in a post-Part 1 DLC era, I figured it's about time we have another chit-chat regarding the DLC. We're done with Part 1, of course, so, no need to bring that up or relive any of that. No, we're going to be talking a little bit about Part 2 today. You've seen the title and you've seen the thumbnail, so I'm sure that you're wondering what I'm wondering here. Is there a possibility of a chance at redemption for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet hiding within Part 2 of the DLC? Yeah, no, trust me, I thought that the question in of itself was insane well before saying it out loud. I must be insane for having any hope of redemption for this game at this point, right? Why in the world would I even care? Well, I have a couple of reasons. For one thing, I don't hate the game. Despite all of the problems and stuff that I've complained about within these games, I don't hate them. And even with the problems that we've had with the recent DLC, I don't hate it. It just has a lot of problems in it. We've had multiple cases in which the game or something within the game was released, we complained about it, and they decided to fix it up sometime later down the line. Now, of course, it wasn't anything major, like, letting the games actually be developed for a reasonable amount of time. No, nothing crazy like that, but they do give really subtle changes to certain things. For example, back in 8th Gen, they introduced raid battles to us. Within said raid battles, we had a constant problem of our CPU partners dying. When they died, we lose time on the raids, and when they lose time on the raids, we lose, and that was completely out of our hands. We did not like that, and we made that very clear. Now, within the raid battles for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, whenever our NPC teammates die, we don't lose any time on our timers, and that is a phenomenal subtle change. Now, of course, this is not always the case. There are some transitions in the Pokemon series that make me believe that they practically plugged their own ears and blindfolded themselves. However, I truly do believe that there are times where they can hear us. So in this case, I'm really just hoping that with the lackluster feedback and reviews for the first part of the DLC, they really heard us out this time. My other reasoning, and one of the primary points of this video, is that we literally saw it happen one time before. You guys have already heard me talk about this time and time again on this channel at least like 12 other times. But for those of you that have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, let's go ahead and take a step back in time for a minute. Back in 2019, with the release of Pokemon Sword and Shield, we finally came to understand what Pokemon Company was truly willing to do to this series for some money. A rushed game with false promises was damn near bound to fail. The only reason it made as much money as it did is because Pokemon is an unstoppable empire. The general lack of polish and the practically non-existent story and post-game led to some of the most mixed reviews I had ever seen for a Pokemon game. Pokemon Sword and Shield was very reasonably deemed by many the worst generation of Pokemon. I don't think I've ever agreed with that title per se, but I can absolutely understand why that title came to be. And this is coming from somebody that played the game multiple times. It had the weakest story by far in the series, the most inconsistent graphical style, and the only thing that it really had going for it was its new mechanic, which was raid battling, which didn't really excel it very far in the eyes of many. And so, for about a year or so, Pokemon Sword and Shield sat with the fanbase with a not-so-pretty reputation. After just a couple of months, it sat around and started collecting dust. That is until a couple of months later, most likely during a Pokemon Presents or something, they announced that we were getting a two-parter DLC. And of course, at this point in time, DLC was practically unheard of for Pokemon, so this kinda caught us off guard. Part 1 of the DLC was released that next summer. Now, of course, it was nothing absolutely stellar or mind-blowing or anything like that, but it was a kind of nice addition to have. It came out to not so enthusiastic reviews like they might have been hoping, but that's mostly because it didn't really give us all that much. It gave us a new area to explore, it gave us a couple of new Galarian forms, it gave us one of the worst side quests I have ever seen in a Pokemon game before, and one legendary that can actually evolve, so it was definitely something. However, I think that one of the primary downfalls for Part 1 was that Part 2, right off the bat when it was announced at the same time, looked so much better. I can't speak for everybody here, but personally, seeing that frozen tundra to explore and stuff like that, it held my interest a lot more than Part 1 did. And going into it, I think that it's safe to say that me and plenty of others were not disappointed by what they gave us. Comparing it to Part 1, it was a no-brainer that Part 2 had a lot more to actually offer to us. Another huge area to explore that might have been bigger than Part 1's, a minute story with some fun characters to get to know, and 2 new battle modes in Star Battle as well as max raid adventures. Now, I can't speak much on behalf of Star Battles. I didn't really talk to anybody that played it that much, and even me personally, I played it a little bit, had a lot of fun with it, but eventually just kinda sidelined it. However, what I do remember and can definitely speak on, because I remember it quite vividly, is the fact that Max Raid Adventures had everybody and their grandmothers in a chokehold. And that includes me as well. I was utilizing that game mode for pretty much every video back then. You guys remember that? It was a good addition and a great time, and honestly, I do think that it added on to the overall quality of the game. Even if it doesn't fix everything, it was still a good addition. And hell, I almost forgot to mention the fact that this part of the DLC also added 5 new legendaries. Now, of course, 3 out of the 5 are just Galarian forms of Pokemon, however, they have brand new designs and new typings, so at that point, they're new Pokemon in my book. And then of course there's Regieleki and Regidrago, which, to me personally, are pretty damn badass. I remember watching streams of PokeTubers that I enjoy talking about how much the game had pretty much been redeemed at that point, and how much more of a fun game it was because of that second part of the DLC. Thinking back, it probably was just an in-the-moment thing, but I will say Part 1 got nothing like that kind of reception. If Part 1 is the equivalent of like a barren wasteland, then Part 2 is a frickin' oasis. So I've spent all this time rambling and reminiscing about Generation 8 and its DLC. Do you see the pattern that I've tried to link up here? Much like Generation 8, Generation 9, even worse so, is a rushed and broken mess. Within the year, the DLC was announced and Part 1 was released. Part 1 came out to not so stellar reviews for one reason or another. However, much like the last time, it's because Part 2 looked inherently better than Part 1. And this time around, Part 2 doesn't even try to hide the fact that it's going to be inherently better than Part 1 of the DLC. For one thing, we have a continuing storyline, something that Sword and Shield didn't even have in its DLC. The story in the land of Kitakami wasn't absolutely insane or balls to the wall or anything like that, but it was okay. However, the most interesting part is how Kieran develops as a character. He's going down kind of a dark path, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what that leads him to. Because frankly, I was never expecting something like that. Never in a million years would I have guessed that was gonna happen. On top of this, we're going to transfer to a school that's completely centered around battling, which is the name of the game. Who in the hell wouldn't be more interested in something like that? Obviously, there's no way in hell they're not gonna introduce new battle modes and stuff like that, and I cannot wait to see how I get to intermingle with all of these different characters that are obsessed with battling. Next to this, there's apparently also going to be some kind of mini-game or something like that that allows us to unlock the ability of flying, which is a game-breaking ability, by the way. Which I think makes sense because the game is going to be pretty much dead and done after this, so why not give us an ability like that? We've earned that. I'm with it. There's also the fact that we are, probably for the first time in the series, going to have access to pretty much every starter in the entire series in one place, just ready to catch. And considering the stats of starter Pokemon, that is an absolute game changer, especially for early game. I'm just saying, yo, it'll be really cool to actually be able to go out, catch a starter of our choosing, then come back to the Paldea region and be able to utilize that in a main playthrough. Having Infernape available to use on a mainline run would just be, that would be prime time for me. And then, you remember how I mentioned earlier how sometimes they kind of listen? The most specific case that I'm referring to in this moment right now is to the fact that we're gonna have an entire room dedicated to designing. I don't know the exact depths of the customization aspect here, however, it's a lot more than what the base game had to offer us, which was nothing at all. At any given point in time, they could have easily added an update to the base game to allow us to decorate our dorm rooms. However, instead, they decided to just kind of pile it on into the DLC in this one room. Which I guess I'm okay with, because I'm probably going to be spending a majority of my time over there anyway. So with all of that being said, do you guys finally understand the pattern that I've come to recognize here? Part 2 just looks so much better than Part 1, it's not even funny. It has a lot more interesting things going for it, and I'm actually looking forward to that one. And in turn, we could be looking at a real turnaround, not too much unlike what we had with Sword and Shield's DLC. But hold on, let me just slow down and breathe for a second. I'm sure that a lot of you are asking the same exact question that I am in my head right now. Do I, in my heart, truly believe that Part 2 of this DLC can make Pokemon Scarlet and Violet redeemable for all of the nonsense that it's given us? If I'm being 100% honest to shinks with myself, no, probably not. While I do enjoy the game, despite what this DLC might offer us, it really doesn't excuse a lot of what the game should have given us to begin with. And that's not even referring to the fact that the functionality sucks. However, you've got to admit, it is nice to dream. As we sit here and twiddle our thumbs waiting for the next DLC, I can only hope and pray that they've really taken into account what happened with Part 1 of the DLC and really take their time on Part 2, because there truly is no rush on that. At this point in time, we still have high nor hair of a release date that they could have easily announced at the most recent Nintendo Direct. We already know for a fact that even within a Nintendo Direct, they won't shy away from talking about Pokemon, especially considering the fact that they talked about the DLC in the previous Nintendo Direct before the most recent, and they talked about Detective Pikachu both times. This just leads me to believe that they are still trying to cook here, and they might have actually listened to the point where they actually, at the very least, might try to make the game function a little bit. I'm just hoping that during this downtime they use it very, very wisely to polish up this DLC and give us something worthy of our time and money. All I'm saying here is that there is absolutely no reason as to why this DLC can't at least be good. I'm not even asking for great, I'm not asking for stellar, I'm asking for good. And in this case, I am also referring to the functionality. So, please guys, just cook. But I'm gonna go ahead and stop talking now. I've rambled on well over long enough. So, the mic is already in your hand. So you go ahead and tell me what you guys think about the possibilities of Part 2 of the DLC, possibly, somewhat, maybe, kind of, potentially being somewhat redeeming for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Do you believe that it's a possibility? Do you think that Part 2 could be somewhat of a turnaround, much like it was for Pokemon Sword and Shield a couple of years ago? Or do you think that this game has no hope, it's dead and done, nothing can save it, and even if Part 2 of the DLC is good, there's nothing worth going into there? You guys go ahead and let me know everything that you guys are thinking in the comment section below, because you know for a fact that I am always down there with you guys. But with that, it does appear to be skedaddle o'clock, so I'm gonna go ahead and do just that. I'd like to thank you guys ever so much for watching. I truly do hope you enjoyed. Do me the greatest favor of dropping a like and a comment, and consider subscribing for more content just like this here. And with that, I'm gone. So thanks again, hope you enjoyed, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next video. Do me the greatest favor, taking good ass care, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!